Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. What's on your mind? Wow, a lot is going on. It's going on in our neighborhoods, it's going on around the world, it's going on everywhere. But today it's all about love. It's about whatever is on any of our guests' mind to talk about what's on their mind. For those of you who are friends and family and fellow artists and fans that I have through Meta, Facebook, and Instagram, you all know that I am leaving at the end of the month. I have made a decision to leave everything at the end of February. And I have a lot of reasons why I'm doing that. Zuckerberg is only the icing on the cake. I believe that we have become a nation of voyeurs and narcissists, and we are pretty much caught up in this world right now of what they want us to think, believe, and feel. And I am ready to get off of that merry-go-round. Uh, this is not a bad thing. It's not a sad thing, as some people think, because I will be in control of my own narrative. I will be in control of the content that I put out. By the way, you can all subscribe to my newsletter. It goes out every Monday religiously, and I never spam. That's a promise. I have my website, richardskipper.com. I'm on YouTube, as you can see right now. So there are many, many, many ways for us to remain in touch over the rest of our lives that have nothing to do with the algorithms of social media. But with that in place, I'm going to bring on our first guest today. I have four incredible people waiting in the wings, and hopefully my fifth one will show up. None of them know who I'm going to bring on, but I'm going to bring on the first guest, and we're going to talk and find out what is on his mind. And that's my dear friend, Doug DeVita. And Doug, I want to ask you, what's on your mind this Valentine's Day?
What's on my mind is I'm very happy where I am in my life. And Valentine's Day for me is a very personal day because it's also the anniversary of the day that I met the man who was going to become my husband. We met on Valentine's Day in 1993.
Wow.
So we've been together 32 years. So it's a very special day for me.
Wow. And what was it about? Do you remember? I'm sure you do. I do with my own husband. The moment I met him, and I don't know about your situation, but we have been together since the day we met. There were no, there was never that decision of, is this the right person for me? Is this not the right person for me? Uh, it just was. And it's the way it's been for now. This is our 35th year together.
It's the same. It's the same for us.
Yes.
We met on a very cold Sunday night, Valentine's Day, as I said, at the Indian restaurant Davat on the East 50s.
Oh, and I love Indian food.
Yeah.
So that was a double whammy right there. So beyond that, is there anything that's on your mind that you want to talk about today?
Well, I mean, I don't want to talk about the state of the world, except to say that it is upsetting me, and I'm doing the best I can to negotiate through this. The positive thing about all of this is that as you mentioned earlier in a private conversation, that I'm prolific, and I am, but I'm even more prolific now. I have been writing. I am burying myself in my work, and it's good because I'm getting stuff done. So that makes me happy.
And I want to let everyone know who's watching. I mean, you are a great playwright, but
Thank you.
and I will have the links to your website on the YouTube channel so that anyone will be able to check in and find out a little bit more about you and what's going on in your world. We won't talk about the state of the world, but let's talk about the state of Doug in the world. How do you find that your writing is a great outlet for anyone? And I want to say to everyone out there, a very important aspect of my day, each day, are the morning pages. Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist Way, talks about beginning each day, and she calls it a mind dump, where you just write and write and write, and you don't need, it doesn't even have to be legible, because no one else is going to see it unless you want them to. But it's a matter of putting your thoughts on paper. And I think it's important to do that. Obviously, you have this outlet because you want, you desire, you require the thoughts to go from here through your hands to the written word, and obviously onto a stage somewhere where other people are going to hear that. But how do you find that you're coping in the craziness of this world that we're living in currently?
Well, as I said, I do write minimum 3 hours a day, sometimes up to 6 hours.
Hmm.
Um, I don't do mind dumps because I'm in I can't stop editing myself as I'm writing.
Hmm.
So it's like it's not a mind dump because I'll just go back and I'll rewrite. I mean, that's how I work. I've tried many times to just mind dump, but it's like no, I have to change it. So that's why I actually, when I get a first draft done, it's actually kind of tight. Not that nothing needs revisions, everything needs revisions, of course, but it's like I've been revising as I've been working. So,
Hmm.
um, but I find it calming.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if you can see behind me.
Yeah, I do.
You can see, kind
He's
of
lying.
see.
I can see him. I can see him.
Yeah, there's
Ah,
Calvin.
oh, wow.
He helps a lot. He's usually right underneath me here at my feet. I guess today he wants to be on his sofa, one of his sofas. That's also very calming. And I go downstairs. We have the complex where I live. We have a pool. I go down there. I use the pool. That helps. I've been doing physical therapy. I recently had surgery, so that also helps when I do the exercises at home. So it's stuff like that. And Joe, my husband, and I, we laugh. We laugh at a lot of things as much as we can. So
Well, I laugh at the absurdity of the world, although it's serious stuff going on, I realize. But I just, and we are all on this merry-go-round that's getting faster and faster and faster. It reminds me of the merry-go-round and the movie Strangers on a Train, the Alfred Hitchcock
oh my
movie.
God, yeah,
And
that's a great metaphor.
and that's, where we are right now. But how is the political climate affecting your writing,
Oh,
on any level?
it's becoming. I mean, I've always been kind of dark in dark humor is my thing. It's becoming darker, and it is
Mhm.
the two. I'm juggling two scripts right now, and both of them are fairly political in nature, even though um, their basic story are romantic stories. But one is I don't know if you're familiar with the Pralin scandal in Paris in the 1840s. It was made into a very romantic book and very romantic movie in the 30s and 40s. All This in Heaven too. The
Mhm.
real story is far more lurid, but it plays to my wheelhouse about what I write about. So and that was a very rough period. I mean, that central story between the governess and the duchess and the duke and their children, it ended up taking a king off his throne. So it's a very charged story. And the other thing that I'm working on, also from a very romantic point of view, and I will talk about this now for the first time publicly. I'm adapting a passage to India.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, and I'm taking it from a very romantic triangle between Dr. Aziz, Adela Quested, and Cyril Fielding. So, but there's a lot of politically charged stuff in that as well. So it is infiltrating into my writing.
Well, that's incredible. I want you to stick around, as you
Sure.
will, and we're going to bring on our next guest. And I'm actually going to let you bring on our next guest. So pull a number 1 through 3, and we'll see who's next in the queue.
3.
And that is my friend Laurie Towers. And
Hello.
Laurie, and we're going to get to this in just a moment. But Laurie, I've got a question for you.
Go right
What
ahead.
is your favorite love song or romantic Broadway or film moment?
Okay, I'm going to say At Last by that's it. I always say that gets you from the living room to the bedroom. By the time the song ends, that's it. That's where it begins and ends for me. So
And of course, it's
absolutely.
Etta James.
Oh my God, she's everything. She is
Yes.
everything. So that's my happy Valentine's Day to both of you.
Thank you, and to
Thank
you
you.
too. Doug,
Thank
meet
you.
Laurie.
Thank you.
Um,
Nice to meet you.
so Laurie, you can talk about whatever is on your mind. It can be about anything that Doug or myself talked about, or you can take us in a completely different direction. The ball is in your court.
Well, firstly, I'm sorry I'm not wearing red because I don't have it. So I'll keep my head like this.
Come and look at
But
my closet sometime.
I certainly will. But I loved your tantamount to strangers on a train and being under that merry-go-round, because that's kind of where we are now. And
Hmm.
I always think about Brecht and what was the quote that he said? Will there be singing in the dark times? Well, yes, they'll be singing about the dark times, and this is where the arts has to come forward and just stand tall, because we're in for a hell of a 4 years. We don't want to talk about politics, but
Well,
that's
Laurie, I
where we
have to
are.
say this. Think about this for a moment. Everything that's happened so far has been in 3 weeks.
I know, I know. There's more to come. And you know what? I always say to people, I wasn't surprised by what he could do. I'm surprised by how we co-signed this. So
Thank you.
shame on not us, the rest of us.
Well, I'm going to change the subject a little
Go ahead.
bit
Go right ahead, Dawn.
because I want to talk about you because
Oh,
you create, no, but you have a jewelry line
yes,
to
yes.
deal with this time. Let's talk about, first of all, how that came to be. Was this something that you were thinking about prior to this?
No,
Or, and you're wearing your earrings
I
and your neck,
am.
and I
That's
did get,
exactly right.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
My husband and I went down to the People's March, I think it was 3 weeks ago, and I wanted to wear something radical, and I always made my own jewelry. And I just said, I want to get something a little bit more involved. So I wore my little my beret, and people started going crazy about the jewelry. So I said to myself, you know what, there might be something to this. So I created the line, um, axing the oligarchy, and it
But
just
tell
took
them what
off.
the line is called.
Axing the oligarchy, the oligarchy.
Yes.
That's it. And I at first was thinking about patriarchy, but then I said, you know what? I love my male friends and my husband, so let's get the men involved who also are against this. So I was down at Stonewall the other night, and Georgie Dandris, who you know, and Maria Gentili, who you know, and
Yes. Yeah.
I gave them rainbow daggers and axes, and we're all a part of this movement, and
Now,
we need
Laurie,
to be.
are you in Manhattan?
I'm in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as I said to Doug at the beginning of the program, there's a big rally going on
Monday.
right now
Oh,
uh,
yes. Yes.
at the Stonewall Inn
Yeah. Yeah.
because, I mean, anyone who knows the history, those who don't know, it was the drag queens and the transgendered community who said, to quote a famous movie, "We're as mad as hell, and we're not taking this anymore."
That's exactly right.
And but it is mind-boggling that there are people in our government who want to erase the history
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't align with their view of what they think
That's
history
exactly right.
was or
Hmm.
should be.
And John and I went down inauguration day. We didn't want to be home. We didn't want to watch TV. We went to the Stonewall, and I said, we have to be in the house where resistance was built. That's what we had to be. And that's where we were.
How do you and John get through this? I mean, Doug is a writer. You're
Mm-hmm.
obviously designing your jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get through the day-to-day minutia of what's going on right now?
John is a writer too, and he's a very dark writer. He's got 4 books out. So we're always involved in events that support this. We're both musicians. But what I'm doing with my public relation clients now is I'm bringing everybody out, anybody that could be eclipsed. And you know Alexis Hunter, she was on your show.
Yes.
Joe
Who also
Preston,
designs jewelry.
that's exactly right. Joe Preston, who has a book out about Jackie Curtis. of Andy
Oh, wow.
Warhol. I'm bringing all of them out. Anybody that could be eclipsed, I'm bringing them out to the front. So it's about, to get to them, you got to go through me. And that's what I'm doing right now.
Well, what do you think is the method of us getting through, uh, God help us, the next 4 years without being eclipsed when it's like a tsunami is coming at us? I mean, the POTUS brags
Mm-hmm.
about how much he's
Mm-hmm.
done in 3 weeks. And the truth of the matter is, folks, whether it's getting through or not, he's doing a lot.
Yes.
And that's not to say that it's a positive thing,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot's going on right now.
What we've done for centuries and what we will do in the future, this is never going to stop. You know, as long as we lead with ego, and I hate to say it, as long as there's white male imperialism, this is what's going to happen. So
You can say it, Laurie, because I say the same thing.
but that's exactly it. So, you know, stand firm. Don't, you know, I think we can't dissolve. We can't say, you know what, they're going to win, so why should I vote? They're going to, no, this is what we've done. This is what we'll always do. Stand together and we'll do it. It's going to go on. So just deal with this as running a marathon. Sprint, you know, be a sprinter. Don't try to take it all at once. We have a long run ahead of us. We're going to do this. We're going to do this.
How do you decompress? How do you deal with it? Because it's all around us, and I don't know about you and Doug, but I have friends all the time who are calling me saying, "You're not going to believe what I just saw in the news," and I go, you know, unless it's going to really affect me, I don't want to hear it, because my philosophy is that we go to the Port Authority and we find some homeless man on the street, bring him home, clean him up, put him in a suit, and put him on television, because he will make just about as much sense as the people that we are electing into office, or those who are not elected into office, who are making decisions that are going to affect each and every one of us.
Well, I'll always say alcohol helps. That's number one. But watch the news just a half an hour in the morning, half an hour at night. To know what's going on, to be in tap with what's going on, and then do whatever you can. I'm going to be in the march, not my president's march on Monday. I'll be there. John will be there. Do the thing. Not everybody could protest, and I understand that. But write a check if you can. If you could afford it, write it. But whatever you could do, change somebody's opinion during the day. That's what we have to do every single day for the next 4 years. We could manage that, I think.
I think we can manage that. So where exactly are you going to be marching?
I think it's Union Square. I think it starts at 1:00 in Union Square. So that's what we'll be.
And I know that there are marches that are being planned all around the country.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to bring on our next guest.
Good.
You're going to bring on our next guest. So we have two people waiting in the wings. And Stephen
nice.
Carl McCaslin, if you're watching the show, I hope that you can somehow find your way here, because I'd love for you to join the conversation. So number one or number two?
Number one.
And that brings on my dear friend, Gary Allen, who, folks, is right there in the middle of it all in Florida.
There he is.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
So, Gary, before you jump into the conversation, I'm going to ask you, what was the most heartwarming Valentine's Day that you ever experienced?
1984. It was in Los Angeles. I was performing at the Improv. I was one of the MCs that night. And there was a young lady in the audience who was working for J. Walter Thompson at the time in LA. She was getting ready to move back to Chicago, where she was from, where she started her career. And she was heckling everybody in the audience. Everybody in the audience. So much so, and it was Valentine's Day. Billy Crystal came on next. And Billy looked at me and I said, "If you can shut her up, I'll buy you a new car." He said, "Thanks, Jay Leno." And so he got going and he never shut her up. Make a long story short, we were closing up for the night. I was getting ready. I was having my final beer because I had to be on the set of Hill Street Blues the next morning. And we spent that night and the next 9.5 years together.
Wow. Well, good for you.
I
Nice.
met
So-
her the same way that Jay Leno met Mavis, and
Oh,
my prayers go out to Jay and Mavis right now.
I haven't heard what's going on.
Mavis is in final stages of
Oh,
Alzheimer's.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
And I just got
Yes.
off the phone a couple days ago with Will Schreiner. Bruce Phalange and I talked about it the other day when he was on the show. And my business partner is also going through it too with his wife. And but I want to say something special to Laurie, if I could.
go ahead.
At
I'm all
last. At last.
Bless you, dear. Bless you, dear. Oh, I love
And
it.
by the way, Laurie, you have a beautiful face.
Oh,
Doug,
thank
there's
you,
nothing
my
wrong
love.
with yours either, but I'm not much
Oh,
for the
how
hair.
sweet. How
That's
sweet of you. Thank you. Thank you, my love.
And I want, and by the way, I just want to say this out loud. Besides talking to Doug, Laurie, I want you to get a hold of me after the show.
Sure.
As you can tell, I have my own show,
Oh,
and it's on a number of major networks. So I
Thank you
definitely
so
would like
much.
to talk to some of the people that you represent as we keep on moving
I would
forward.
love that. Thank you, darling. Yes.
Also,
You know,
if
more
I
than-
may
more-
just
Yes, Doug.
interject, Laurie, I want your information about your jewelry.
Thank you. Of
Because
course.
I'm
Yes.
an old Italian man. I live in New Jersey. That's what we do. We
Mm.
wear jewelry.
That's it. There
Well,
you go.
Laurie, you can see her web address,
Thank you.
and by all means, get in touch with each other.
Yes, that's nice.
But Gary,
Yes.
I want to ask, what's on your mind? It can be about anything that any of us have spoken about, or you can take us in a.
Well, I want
Right.
everybody to sit back for a moment and just understand where I'm coming from. Before I got back into the world of show business, which I've been in most of my life, I worked in the world of politics. And I worked for Nixon when I was in the Air Force. I didn't work for him, but when I was based at Andrews, I was with him a lot. He would be rolling over in his grave. So would Ronald Reagan, and so would any Republicans from back then of what's going on. What Trump is doing, he's piling as much crap on at one time to see how far he can go, how far he can stretch it before the Democrats and the judges and everybody else and the American people say, whoa, we didn't vote for this. We voted for the economy to change, more money in our pocketbooks, and we are, we're not getting that. He's stretching his ego. Yes, he's on a revenge tour. There's no doubt about it. Everybody that he's getting fired, everybody that is getting fired or will be getting fired had something to do with January 6th. Now, with January 6th, he pardoned those people to pardon himself, to wash away the guilt of knowing what he did as a traitor, as a fascist to this country. So the best way to do it is to whitewash it completely. Laura, you put it very well. If he can remove LGB people, which my uncle Tubby Boots was a gay performer. I've been in show business all my life. I've been around gay people all my life. There's nothing wrong with human beings being gay or straight or whatever the case may be. Hey, I'm bisexual. If I can't get it for free, I buy it. So at any particular rate, Bill Maher and I talked about this about 6 months ago before the election. And we both said the very same thing. He's going to do everything he can, the fascist that he is. And eventually the American people, by the way, what he's doing has been coming on in this country for 15, 20 years. The middle America has been feeling left out by everybody. So they went to Trump because they saw something that they felt comfortable with. Yeah, I can tell you off. Yeah, I can do whatever I want. Yeah, I can do this. I had a friend of mine go for a job the other day, and the guy looked at him and said, I'm not going to hire you. You're an old coot. And he said, I don't care if you sue me. Trump's in the White House. I'll be defended, and I won't have to pay a dime to you. We've got people that have incredible egos. We have a vice president who served in the Marine Corps, and he's a disgrace to the Marine Corps uniform he wore and that my father wore. I wore an Air Force uniform. Now, we must understand something. Trump is a coward down deep inside. He's a bully coward. He doesn't do anything on his own. When he says, oh, well, that's what I heard people say. And then when somebody catches him in a lie, he goes, well, I really didn't work with that person very much. And yet they worked with him day by day. And he has sycophants who want power. That's what they want. They want power. And the Republican senators have sold out their country to keep their asses in seats instead of realizing that if they don't defend their country, there's going to be no country for their asses to sit in any seat. But they don't care. They have the power for now. They're like Ted Cruz, an idiot, a complete moron. And to think of the cabinet he's going to have, Robert Kennedy Jr., are you kidding me? This man's nuts even in his own family. Kelsey Gelbert, she's a fascist. She's a socialist. Tulsi. Well, she may have been a colonel in the United States Army, but she's a disgrace to the uniform that she wore. I'm terribly sorry. Oh, and Hexaf, go back to Fox News where you belong. Okay, go back to Fox News. Chris Cuomo and I talked about it 3 weeks ago. In the afternoon, I called him up. I said, what do you think is going to happen? He said, Gary, he's going to press it and push it and stretch it as far as he can until the American people have had enough. He said, it'll probably take about a year, but if the prices don't go down and inflation keeps going up, they'll have about had it with him. He's only good for 2 years. However, I think he's going to try to stretch it into another term beyond this one. Mm-hmm. I'm almost positive he's going to try to pull something. And with the Speaker of the House, who has no backbone at all, who knows?
Well, you mentioned,
but hang in there. But hang in there, kids. It's going to get better. I promise it will.
But you mentioned earlier Bill Maher, who I am a huge fan of, and and for the entire time that the president was in the White House the first time, Bill Maher was saying that man will not leave peacefully, and he said it from the very beginning, and everyone laughed at him. Because they thought, of course he's going to leave. That's the way things are done here. But I want to ask you the same thing that I asked both Doug and Laurie. How do you decompress, or what is your psychological way of getting through this to the best of what you are able to deal with?
I try not to watch as much news except just to keep up, just for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And then I go watch porn for a couple of hours.
Has it gotten political yet?
I look, I served 2 tours in Vietnam, and I served with a lot of heroes. I served with a lot of men who are in Arlington National Cemetery. And I've also served with some men who are buried in their hometown cemeteries who have died since. We are a country that will only take so much for so long, and then we will fight back. Don't worry, better days are coming. Like I said, he's throwing as much spaghetti on the cabinets as he can, as long as he can get away with it. But slowly but surely, it'll catch up to him. He's a phony. He's a fraud. The people he surrounds himself are phonies and frauds. So I take a deep breath. Besides, I have other things to worry about, booking my show, worrying about paying my rent, worrying about paying this, paying that, I can't. Now, as far as right now, you 3 have someone in your life. I'm 72-year-old fart. I don't have anybody in my life. I mean, where I live in Palm Bay, Florida, that thriving metropolis, the all-night diner does close at 12 noon.
Well, it closes early here in New York too. New York is no longer the city that never sleeps.
Yeah.
Well,
by the way, your mayor is a con artist. That guy has got to be the biggest con artist that's ever served as a mayor of New York City, next to maybe.
That's
and by the way,
topic.
I just want to say one thing, Richard. It's not easy to find a room that has a individual air conditioning unit in it as yours has. There is a thing called central air conditioning.
I live in an old house that was built at the turn of the last century. And 2 centuries ago, actually, it's an old farmhouse, and I'm lucky to have this air conditioning in there, and the radiator too, as you can see.
Yes, I saw the radiator, but I wasn't going to go take it. I wasn't going to stretch it that far.
That's okay. I want to bring on our next guest because she has been waiting patiently, and I absolutely love her, and I'm thrilled that she said yes to being here. Deborah, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to tell us about a moment that really made you feel loved and appreciated, and then we will get to what's on your mind.
Well, I have to say, every Valentine's Day, while my mother was still living, she would send me a little Valentine. I thought I'd show it to you. It was
Wow.
that kind of Valentine.
Oh, that's cute.
And my mother lived till she was 98, so I was blessed with lots of little Valentines. This was the last one. And I always felt loved and appreciated. And it came, my father and mother were both, I grew up on a dairy farm in the middle of Minnesota, a farm labor Democrat in the land of Humphrey, etc. And the story was my mother went to the 8th grade, my father went to the 6th, and was one Valentine's Day, and everybody got Valentines except for my father. And he was a very romantic kind of guy, and they memorized poems in school, and they sang songs in school. But basically, when you were confirmed, or if they were Jewish, if they had their bar mitzvah or whatever, they no more school. Everybody had to go to work. So the story would always be, remember the people who don't get Valentines, because it can hurt your heart. And I guess I realized that men were more romantic than women on that score. So I love my New Yorker. This is a 100th anniversary of the New Yorker. I go to bed reading that every night. I mean, I don't get through all the articles, but they do sometimes put me to sleep. And I got a lovely Valentine from my sister, because we learned the importance of a Valentine. And this was the other, I would say Valentine's Day resonates. I remember when I was on tour with Annie, 1980, the hostages were released from the Middle East, and everybody was having tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree, and we had to explain to the kids what that was all about. Yeah. And almost every one of the children, they grew up, they're now 50 years old, they have their own children, and their view of politics changed, because when politicians are campaigning, there's a lot of hugging of children. And I would often say to the mothers, do you know what those people stand for?
Huh.
Do you know why? I think there's an education program that needs to happen in this country where everybody does need to know who the representative is. I've been living in the same place in New York City for 48 years. I know where my representative lives. I've worked as a poll worker, and Gary, not a pole dancer, Gary. I know I could have made more money as a pole dancer, but no, I'm a poll worker.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm sorry that didn't come into my mind, but thank you. I'll remember that.
Thank you. That's all right. You can have that joke. Anyway,
from Minnesota, you got to be a little on the quick upside, there.
Oh yeah,
see,
yeah.
Yeah, don't you know?
I've many times when the Academy Award was going to go to the woman from Fargo, I probably was the only one on the Upper West Side that could go, well, I really don't think you should do that. It was like, you would do a Minnesota accent, like there's a cow. Yes. What's a cow?
I performed in Minnesota once with Engelbert, and we both said after the end of the 3 days, let's get the hell out of here. It's cold. I mean,
it is cold there.
I mean, for an Englishman, that was really cold.
Well, I have to say, Minnesota takes very seriously voting. And I think in terms of the future, we have to take voting very seriously. So I always have been like, let's be friendly and say hi to people. And I go to people like doormen and janitors and anybody in my street. And I said, you're voting, aren't you? Well, I learned a lot of things, like Jehovah's Witnesses do not vote. Wow. They don't vote. They've never voted. It was like, wow. Or I learned that certain people in my neighborhood would not be voting. Or I realized that certain people in my neighborhood felt very differently about the election than I did, very differently. But I guess if I'm going to die, I'll die with my hand open saying hi, because that's who I am. Because I'm a Minnesota nice person in Manhattan, and that doesn't change.
That's cool.
It certainly doesn't change on Valentine's Day.
No.
So one of the things you said, how are we getting through this? When COVID started, I started to do a reading group with my friends, because I kind of like Shakespeare. I like the written word. I'm an architect of literature. I want to have great stories to tell, and Shakespeare's not bad. And in the beginning of this country, way back when it was just the Bible and you could carry a Bible and maybe some Shakespeare, and cowboys knew Shakespeare. So, I mean, I can do Shakespeare. But I said, let's just do Julius Caesar, okay? We just finished Julius Caesar. Boy, was that fun. And now we're doing Henry IV. And we did Anthony and Cleopatra. We're kind of doing all, and we do this as round robin. And my group of people, there's an 80-year-old actor in Hawaii that gets up very early to read with us. There's a farmer in Minnesota who reads with us. It's a lovely group of people, and we've been united in 40 minutes on Zoom, and we've been through almost the entire. I'm the teleprompter. I share the screen, and we just have to read it, and we don't. We're very forgiving. That's gotten me through. Singing with other people has gotten me through, and I have a show that I've been doing for 25 years that I wrote 25 years ago. I wrote it when I was in the musical The Titanic. So when you feel like you're really going to hell, you've got to think about life or whatever. But I wrote a show about the women who survived, because I know I could have probably played the men too. My first job was in the club, which I played a turn of the century gentleman, kind of like Victor Victoria. But I went, maybe crazy, but I just want to do the. So I've been doing that for 25 years, and I just came back from Terre Haute, Indiana.
Oh.
And Tuesday night in Terre Haute, I'm very proud to say there were 1,450 people that really wanted to come to see 1912. Now, why is that? They were really interested in 1912, maybe because they didn't want to be in 2025. But and the next place I'll be going is College Station, Texas, and that's a repeat performance. And what's always amazing to me is that I'll meet descendants of people who survived the Titanic, and that kind of history. I mean, history really, you don't, and your history, your history of having been served in Vietnam, or your history with musicians would be, everybody's history is very important. And I've become a Titanic lady, I guess.
Well, you said something a moment ago, and it was a slip, where instead of saying that you wrote the show, you wrote a book. And I'm thinking that you should write a book celebrating these unsinkable women and what made them unsinkable.
But I really hope, the show is being published. And I did a reading this summer. I went, well, what if it wasn't a one-person show where one person does 9 people? What if it was 9 women, like between the age of like 14 and 22, like high school students, college students? What would that be like to give these words to other people so they have really good monologues to do? And I've been watching a lot of and I'm excited about maybe passing these words on, because there's nothing more powerful than using your voice as a singer or a comedian or a speaker or a playwright. But when you put those words, when you give somebody a voice that they might not have had before, I think we need to communicate. We need to speak with other people. And I did this little reading. It wasn't a little reading. It was a very good reading. And the young women were so jazzed. They were excited. They felt like they were doing something important. And that made me proud. I certainly have enough material for a book, but it's like, do we need another book? Maybe. It's as long
Yes.
as read.
You should see my bookshelves. I mean, I love books, and I love holding a book in my hand. I love going into, I have to say, and then we're going to do a little round robin game playing here. I think that Stephen is going to try to log on in a moment, but it's important. I mean, we've got Amazon and we've got Barnes and Noble and everything, but walk into a small bookstore, and they're in they're in New York City. Walk in and say, do you have this book on your shelf? Go into your local library and say, do you have this book on your shelf? Because not only will that get those books out into the proper hands, but it's important that we keep these small businesses alive. I'm going to bring Stephen on in just a second.
And please, all of you, I mean, the next stop is the Library of Congress. I met her at Zabar's, and she works for the Library of Congress, and she said there's a coup happening in DC. And I said, is the Library of Congress safe? And she said, well, it's the legislative branch. I really mean think carefully about the
Right.
By the way, does anybody know? Does anybody know how the Library of Congress got started?
Well, let's hold that for another time.
No. Real quick.
I need to get Stephen on.
Thomas Jefferson sold his books to the government.
Yes. I need to get Stephen on because he just got here.
Okay.
And, so, hello, Stephen.
Hi, I'm so embarrassed, but all of your messages have been going to spam. I was messaging you on Facebook, and then suddenly I was like, well, let me check spam. And I had 4 emails from Richard Skipper, who I thought maybe the show was canceled today.
But, again, as I've said before, this morning, one of the things that I do, and I will talk about this at the end of the show, is I pick up the phone and I call friends from time to time. I try to make a point of calling somebody each day that I haven't spoken to in a while. And a local church, they were doing Hello, Dolly. And I went and I auditioned and I got cast to play Barnaby Tucker. And the woman who played Dolly, there was a very brief moment, when I converted to Catholicism. And she became my godmother. And I reached out to her daughter this morning and I said, how's your mom? And she said, oh, she passed away in June. And of course, I was so hurt. I said, I had no idea. I would have been there for the family. And she said, I posted it on Facebook. I thought that you would have seen it. Well, we don't see a lot of what's on Facebook. But Stephen, I've been asking everybody, what's on your mind? And since you're late, I don't know if you've heard any of the rest of the show, but you can talk about anything that's on your mind. It could be political. It could be, personal. It could be career-wise. What's on your mind?
Well, that would probably break the speakers because I'd probably just scream. I heard some of the conversation, and I think... I think everything's madness. I keep seeing all of these cancellations at the Kennedy Center. I think I'm conflicted about whether or not people resigning is helpful. A part of me wishes that the people who, really cared and wanted to be in there for the fight stayed for the fight. But I also get the desire to just walk away from a bit of a figurehead position. But, I don't know what good we do from walking away from the fight, and I think that we.
Well, let me ask you a question on that subject. Would you be able, perhaps you are stronger than some, or maybe not, I don't know, but would you be able to sit and break bread with someone who wants to break down everything that you stand for?
I think if it were in the context of the fact that I were already in some sort of executive role and, what happens when we walk away? He's just going to replace us with somebody like him.
But what do you think about what's going on in New York right now with so many people who are stepping down? Because, Gary said it earlier, and I happen to agree with Gary, at the risk of offending anyone out there. But I feel that this particular mayor is very corrupt.
Yes.
Do you think they're doing the right thing by stepping down? Or do you think that they should stay and fight?
I don't know. That's so, for me, it's like they're attorneys. They're not artists. I don't know. I guess I just don't know what we accomplished by walking away, because he's just going to replace Renee Fleming with Kid Rock.
But sometimes walking away is a protest.
Haven't we tried that for a while?
No,
that's my devil's advocate question. I think we've tried that for a while.
But sometimes by saying I'm going to stay on the board with this particular person, even though we all know who he is, it's Maya Angelou. When they show you who are they, believe them. But sometimes my feeling, and this is Richard Skipper speaking, I cannot speak for anyone else, by staying on the board, you're basically legitimizing what he is doing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
But then
by walking away,
there to do that?
by walking away, you live to fight another day. And believe me, he's going to be dragged through the streets like Mussolini, and he and his wife, and nothing good is going to come of it. And believe me, at his age and the way he eats, I'm surprised he hasn't had a stroke by now.
Well, that's another story. But my feeling is that
you gotta walk away and fight another day when you have more ammunition. Right now, it's his time. He's doing the BS, and you can't be wishy-washy about, well, stay or go, stay or go. You don't stick around with a fascist pig.
But I believe that Renee Fleming is in a position that the rest of us are not in. Because of who she is and her cachet, she should take the opportunity to speak out loud and clear at every opportunity. It's when she walks away and disappears into the shadows that it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I didn't want to dunk on her specifically. It was just the first.
No,
name that
but
came to
I'm glad
mind,
you brought that up.
Ben Folds as well. Issa Rae. There's a bunch of them, and I totally respect and understand why. I guess I just don't really understand what that accomplishes for us in the moment. So we walk away, and then we're replaced with somebody just like him. So when we walk away and we're replaced by someone just like him, doesn't that just help him? Doesn't he just have more of control? And I don't know. I don't know. That's just
perhaps you have heard of a team of rivals, which was Abraham Lincoln and the way that he surrounded himself. I probably can speak for Doug and Deborah. I don't know Gary or Laurie. Laurie, I don't know if you have a background as an entertainer, but in this business, even if you're doing a one-person show, as I know Deborah and I both have done, there's no such thing. Because when you're doing a one-person show, there's someone doing the sound and lights. There's someone taking tickets to the box office. There are ushers. There are all these people that come together as a collective to ensure that our audiences, God willing, are going to have the most entertaining, wonderful evening of their lives. Sure. And so, to me, being in this business, I am thrilled every time I get to be in a collaboration. I love to do that. But this man is an enigma because he is not a team player.
He is if it's his team and he's calling the shots.
But even so, he's, his team, I look at Mitch McConnell, for example. And Mitch McConnell is pretty much why we are here today.
Yep.
Mitch McConnell refused. I mean, he said from the very beginning, I'm going to ensure that Obama is a one-term president. Then he went to fight a new Supreme Court judge coming in, Merrick Garland, who, God help us, should have been on the Supreme Court instead of the position that he was put in. And then after January 6th, Mitch McConnell said, that's the end for this guy. That lasted 25 seconds. And then he was endorsing him, standing behind him. And so now that he is in a position, Senator Cannon, is he from Alabama or he's one of the southern states? He said publicly that he was against Robert Kennedy Jr. Being in the position that he was in, but he's going to be running for office again next term, and he cannot afford to be primaried.
Can I add something here, Richard, that a lot of people don't know? Mitch McConnell, when this guy was being impeached, I don't know if it's the first or second time. I think it was the first time. Mitch McConnell could have voted yay to impeach him, and a lot of Republicans would have gone along with him,
I know.
but he
I
didn't.
know.
Mitch
I know.
McConnell is another coward.
Mhm.
He's another coward. And now, because he's not running again, he can afford to say no
Exactly.
to this and no to that.
Mhm.
These men and women that are in Washington, D.C. on the Republican side have no backbone. They
Yep.
are cowards,
Yep.
and they are fighting for their seats in a
Mhm.
country that they may not have for very much longer to have a seat.
Exactly.
Period.
Mhm.
And that's the bottom line. And I, as I said earlier, and Stephen wasn't on at that time. I worked in government. I worked
Mhm.
right beside some of the biggest politicians. I traveled all over the place with Kissinger. Our democracy, as we know it, is in serious trouble because of a guy who is an egotistical maniac, a fascist pig.
Yes. And someone's cat is agreeing with us.
Yes.
That's Emma. That's my Emma.
May I
Yeah.
ask Stephen
I
a
love
question?
Emma. So, but what I want to say, as we begin to wind down here, that as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm going to change course for a second. I began each day with The Artist Way. Julia Cameron is my guru. Just love her. And so, but I read a lot of books on philosophy, a lot of books on promotion and everything. And so I put together these questions, random questions, that I'm going to ask each of you based on my readings this week. And I'm going to start with you, Doug. And the question is, what makes you jump out of bed in the morning?
My dog. He needs attention. And if he doesn't get it, he demands it.
So, Laurie, I want to ask you, this was a question that I came up with during COVID when I was doing my podcast. And I would ask my guests, how are you today? Really? So how are you today? Really?
I either say I live in a world of delusion or I'm over medicating, but I'm okay. The truth is I have food in my refrigerator, money in the bank, health in my system. Everybody that I love is healthy. So I live to fight for another day. So I don't have it bad. Half the world lives far worse than I do. How can I complain?
Yes, you can. But
What? Doesn't
but you can
seem
find
relevant.
you can complain by creating jewelry that people are
There
going
you go. Use it
they
well. Use your anger well. That's exactly right. I agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Gary, what is the nature of your current situation in terms of where you're located in the country right now?
I'm in Palm Bay, Florida, which is just south of Melbourne, south of the Cape. At night, when the rockets go off, I can watch them go off. Although after you watch 2 or 3 of those, you're like, okay, next. But I live in Florida. I grew up in Hollywood, Florida. My dad was a captain for Eastern Airlines. So I went to high school down there. And as soon as I got out of high school, I went in the Air Force. But, things are okay. I mean, I live in an area that's primarily military. 90% of the people here are Trumpers. They don't necessarily express it 100%, but you can see it on their faces. They absolutely think he's like one woman told me once in the grocery store, he is the second coming of Christ. And that's how they feel. And that's not going to change for any time soon until he does something that really, and you bring up January 6th, and of course they deny anything happened. And I finally turned to one woman one day and said, 6 people died that day. She said, no, they didn't.
Ugh.
And I said, look it up. Next time I saw her, she goes, you were right. I'm sorry. 6 people did die. She said, but I'm going to still vote for him because he's better than some old geezer. I said, well, now he is the old geezer.
That's the thing I really don't understand. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, it's okay. Go ahead.
No, just the constant ageism directed at Biden by Trump supporters, as if Trump is also not in his prime elderly years.
Well, like I said earlier, Stephen, I'm surprised with what he eats. But he hasn't had a heart attack by now.
Stephen, I'll say this based on, I'm a news junkie. I'm trying to break away from it. But there's a lot of whataboutism in this country. What about this? Instead of focusing on what's right there in front of them. Yeah. So, Deborah, I'm going to ask you, what words describe what is important to you at this point in your life?
I've always had the same three answers. I try to keep on the path. Peace of mind, the theater, and community. So I try to focus. In the peace of mind means focus, focus. And my new mantra is 8 syllables. At this moment, I am all right. It gets me through.
Mhm.
And then peace of mind, theater. Theater can expand to film, but it's storytelling. It's theater. I believe that people do need to be connected. I'm 74. I'm an older person. I know I don't want to be locked up in a house all the time. I need to talk to people. That's why I left the farm and I'm in New York City. I'm happy to be with other people. Theater, and peace of mind, theater, and this community. I go for community. If I were Jewish, I'd go to the synagogue. I'm Lutheran, but it's new. I go to church on Sunday. We have a shelter for LGBTQ youth, and on the door of the church, there was a thing that said ICE officials are not welcome, and you have to show a judicial warrant. Well, they're only words, but you better know what a judicial warrant is.
Mhm.
It's business to find out. That's my community. And my partner died several years ago, and he was baptized a Lutheran in Ohio, and his ashes are in the secret garden in the backyard of that church. I know where he is, and I can always say, "You are so lucky not to be here." But peace of mind, theater, and community, and so none of that says to be really wealthy. I mean, I didn't choose things that were like, and I want to have a lot of money, and I want to have a lot of respect, and I want people to bow down to me and kiss my ring. No, I want peace of mind, theater, and community. And so far, it's been pretty good.
That's great. Stephen, what small step can you take today that will put you on the path to something wonderful tomorrow?
Oh, goodness. That's a really tough question. For me, I really enjoy, not to sound like a goody two shoes, but I have done memory care music therapy for years. And honestly, it makes me feel so good. It always puts me back in the right frame of mind. I feel like, I've done something really good, but also you see how seniors in memory care respond to music, especially the songs they remember. And I don't know, it's like Olaf and Frozen. It's like a warm hug, it's just, so I feel like when I start to feel like I'm really out of touch with everything, I need to go and do that. And then I sort of get centered again. And I don't know, maybe that's a goody two-shoe response, but I don't think I've realized that until right now, that always really sort of puts me back in reality.
And
That's
I want
very
you
admirable.
all at the end of tonight's show to turn on Etta James singing At Last.
Yeah.
And that will take you from
Oh,
this
yeah.
moment to the bedroom. So
I'm gonna at last.
Sing
yes.
it. Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm going to, wrap everything up right now, but I give everyone on these shows a chance to have your final word. It can be about something that we spoke about today, something that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just anything that you want to say, whatever pops into your head. I will pick someone when I finish, and then you will pick the next person, and so on, and so on, and so on. And when the last person says goodbye, I will end the show so that you don't have to worry about how do I end this. I am, I read a lot of books, and I got a new book today because one of the things, it's very interesting since I announced my leaving Meta, and it's a rollout for me because I want to do it on the last day of February rather than just saying, I'm quitting, I'm out of here, that's it.
Mhm.
I'm taking the time to reach out to the people, like all of you, that matter to me, and so that I can keep this dialogue going on. But it's interesting. The one thing that has triggered so many people, one person has told me that I am committing career suicide by leaving. And a lot of people are like, how do you stay in touch with each other? Because this is how we build our communities. Wrong, wrong, wrong.
Mhm.
Because what has happened is that social media has become we are in two boxes, and sometimes we're in both boxes. We've either become voyeurs or narcissists, and we post things because we want everyone to be our audience instead of making. Carol Channing once said, there are entertainers and there are performers. A seal is a performer. A seal is interested in getting only one thing, a fish. It will balance that ball on its nose to get that fish. An entertainer is interested in what's going on out there in the house. And it's important that we celebrate each other. Hitting a like button, leaving a comment, and sharing is not engagement. The way that Facebook originally was set up was engagement. And that's truly missing. There are more ads than there are anything else. And you can post something and less than 3% of your friends and followers will ever see it. So I'm looking at other ways of getting the word out. And I got this new book today. And it's 101 Ways to Promote Yourself. And it's beyond social media. So I recommend this to everybody because we all have something that we want to promote. So this is my suggestion to all of you to get this book, 101 Ways to Promote Yourself. So that's my suggestion for the day. I'm going to give my closing remarks. And then as each of you give your final I would like you to mention something, a book, something that you read, or something that has inspired you in the last week as we wrap up today. So I end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook, go to your email list. Now that we're getting away from Meta, go to your email list. And the second name that pops up, instead of responding with an email response, call that person. And let that person know the impact that they're making in your life. By doing so, you're going to make an impact on their life. I have a dear friend, Sean Moniger, and he says we're all in the same storm, but we're in different size boats. And I always say, I don't care what size boat you're on, as long as you have a skipper by your side. And I'm going to leave the screen, and I'm turning it over to you, Laurie, and then you'll pick the next person that you want to follow you. And as I said, so on and so on. You all are my special Valentines. So thank you for being here today, and thank you all for tuning in. I'm going to turn it over to you, Laurie.
Thank you, darling. And in step with Valentine's Day and being the day of love, my favorite quote from Mother Teresa is, let's always meet each other with a smile, because the smile is the beginning of love. So I think that's perfect for today. And I'm going to hand it over to Doug.
Okay. Well, the thing that I read this week that has really inspired me, it's part of my work. I'm rereading A Passage to India, and that is just, it's making me, I just love Forster's language. Gary, I just want to mention, I grew up in Hollywood, Florida also. My father worked for Pan Am. And
my dad's brother was a captain for Pan Am out of New York.
Yeah, he was out of Miami for 6 years, from 1966 to 1972. He was transferred from JFK to Miami, then back to JFK. So from the time I was 6 years old till I was 12, I grew up in Hollywood. So anyway.
Where?
It's over like by what's the name of that air? There's a like little provincial airport. It was like right
North Perry.
North Perry, yeah, right by North Perry.
That's where I learned how to fly.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, okay, I'm going to hand this over to. Oh, and happy Valentine's Day, everybody! I hope you have a wonderful time tonight. Whatever.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug. It was nice of you. You know what I'm saying?
And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Gary.
The word for me is always the same one: gratitude. I'm grateful to the Lord, my Savior, Jesus Christ, for what I have. I don't have a whole lot. I'm struggling at the moment, but you know what? I certainly have more than, Deborah said it best, I have more than what some other people have. But I'm grateful. The Lord our God has always been there for me, and I believe that. There are no atheists in a foxhole, that's for sure. And but I'm very grateful and absolutely wonderfully pleased to have met all of you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful Valentine's Day, and may God bless you with his love and his grace. And to all who are watching, God bless you all very, very much. And I will turn it over to Miss Deborah.
Oh, well, I've been reading. I got this as a gift by a wonderful, my creative assistant, my associate producer, wonderful woman named Britta. And she gave me this book. Oh, you can't see it, but it's so bright. Mary Oliver's Devotions. And it's a poem, and I read, it's not really religious, but it's just a poem every morning. And I have a cup of coffee in the poem, and it
Oliver.
You love her? Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I've learned to love her. And I think the word that I'd like to think about is yield, or maybe more flush. After a big day, you just have to let go, be empty, be an empty vessel, and open yourself to the possibilities of a new day. Because we get very clogged if we don't. And so then I'd like to pass it over to you, Doc.
Just read a fascinating play. My roommate's dog Una barking at the start. Excuse me, miss. I just read a fascinating play called Giant by, I think it was Mark Rosenblatt, that John Lithgow did over in the UK. It's about Roald Dahl and his anti-Semitic comments. And it was really just interesting reading about another writer. And because I always like to end with a laugh, I'm just going to end with the word invented by Meredith Willson, shapoopy. There you go.